Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Assessment for and as Learning in Brightspace webinar today. Thank you so much for joining me here. I just wanted to point out that at the bottom right-hand corner, there is the bit.ly link for you to grab the slide deck and follow along. But if you don't want to do that, no worries, it will be posted online for you afterwards. So just to dive right in, my name is Kaylin Mapp. I am a VLE consultant or a customer success specialist here at D2L. And before this, I was an elementary school teacher and I specialized in spec ed. So just to get started with the agenda, we're going to go over a few housekeeping items together. Then we're going to dive into going over some common assessments that you do in the classroom and kind of giving comparisons or ways to replicate those within Brightspace. And then we're going to go into some live demos. And lastly, we'll point you to the upcoming webinars later this week. So the housekeeping items. The Q&A pod is disabled today and the chat will not be monitored. However, if you do have any questions, please contact k12ont@d2l.com. That email is monitored and they'll be able to answer questions that you might have about Brightspace. And lastly, this recording, as well as the slide deck, will be available on the educator's webinar website for your reference. And that's typically posted a few days after the webinar takes place. So if you want to grab it right now, as I mentioned, you can follow that bit.ly link just in the bottom right-hand corner. So it's bit.ly/feb2_AFL_AAL. So now we're going to look at the two types of assessment that we're talking about today, assessment for learning and assessment as learning. And we're going to do that comparison kind of between what you would do in your classroom and how you would replicate that in Brightspace. So really when you're looking at assessment for learning, you want to be able to determine next steps to advance your students' learning. So in your class, some common things that I would do or I've heard from educators are you'd ask students a question before a lesson to kind of see where their current level of understanding is. In Brightspace, you could schedule a post for activity feeds. So pose the same kind of questions and ask students to comment. And one of the really great things about doing this in Brightspace is that you can schedule them so that they post later on. So you're, not having to go in right after the lesson to kind of post that question or right before. In your classroom, you could also have a discussion with your class. And in Brightspace, I would do the same thing, but use video note in the discussions tool. So you can do this in a synchronous way, but I just wanted to point you to kind of an asynchronous way that you could do this. So in the discussions tool, there's the HTML editor. And in that HTML editor, there's the option to add a video note. And so this allows students to talk for up to 30 minutes to be able to kind of share their thoughts on where they're currently at and their understanding. So it doesn't just need to be text and typing. In my classroom, I would give an entry or exit ticket. And in Brightspace, you could give an entry or exit ticket using a survey or a quiz. So they both function the same way, a survey and a quiz. However, I find that sometimes for students with anxiety, giving a survey might be a little bit less anxiety provoking for them. There doesn't have that same kind of connotation as a quiz. So I'm going to show you how to do that in the demo, how to create a survey. In your class, you could also do a KWL. And in Brightspace, you could do the same thing, but have students submit it to portfolio. So similar to, kind of survey versus quiz, I find that assignments sometimes students can just view it as being more summative, and you can use it for this type of formative assessment, but submitting to portfolio is another option you can do, and students are able to just take a picture from their phone of something that they've worked on and send it right to you in portfolio. And lastly, in my classroom, I would make observations of student work. And on Brightspace, I could give that anecdotal feedback in portfolio. So you don't have to attach a grade item to it. You could just give feedback straight to students, or if you didn't want to give feedback to students and you just wanted to keep it for your own notes, there's an area in portfolio that you can do that. So as you can see, the parts in blue here are hyperlinked. So when you go to look at this slide deck later on, there are some kind of 1 to 3 minute videos on how to do each of these different Brightspace items. We won't have time to go over all of them today, but those resources are available for you to look at later on. So now moving into assessment as learning. So really the reason that you want to do this is to encourage metacognition, to give students the opportunity to monitor and reflect on their learning and identify those next steps. So to do this in my classroom, I would give students a self-assessment to kind of see where they're at and reflect on, where they could go, maybe gaps in their knowledge. And in Brightspace, you could give instant feedback in a quiz. So you could create quiz questions and you could have students, you could change the submission view at the end. So students are able to see right away what they got right and what they got wrong. And you could change the attempt so they could, do it again once they feel a bit more confident. It gives them kind of a benchmark of where they're currently at. You could co-create success criteria for assignments with your students. And in Brightspace, you would achieve this by co-creating a checklist with due dates. So that's one of the demos we're going to go over after this, is how you use our checklist tool. And also you can very quickly add a due date to each item, so it keeps students on track if they are maybe completing a big project. In your classroom, you could have students choose their learning goals and kind of work towards them. So they don't necessarily need to be curriculum based, but they can also be, kind of goals for in the classroom, like behavioral goals and things like that. And in Brightspace, you could do the same thing by creating badges for students to earn. So you're able to create a bunch of badges. You could allow students to see those different badges and have students work towards earning them. And once they, have demonstrated those skills to you, you can award them to them within Brightspace. In my classroom, I would give peer review opportunities so that students can learn from each other and reflect on their peers' learning. And in Brightspace, I would do this using video assignments or discussion. So video assignments is a tool available to you. It's actually run through one of our partners, Bongo. So when you go to the hyperlink, it's going to bring you to a Bongo link. That was not an error. They were the ones that created the kind of documentation on how to do this, but there are opportunities for students to do a peer review. I think it's 3 students can peer review each other's work. And you can also use our discussions tool once again. So a student can submit their work and you could get other students to reply to that work and kind of review and think critically about what their peers are doing, either using text or video note or an audio kind of reflection. And lastly, you could have students reflect on their progress in the classroom. So that's a common thing, maybe with like a writing folder of their progress each month. They're putting in their kind of best piece of work to think about their progress throughout the year. In Brightspace, you could do the same thing by having students complete a portfolio reflection. So taking that quick picture on their phone or submitting something from their computer into portfolio, and there's an option for students to do a verbal or a typed reflection of their work. So really engaging in that metacognition piece. And once again, just a reminder that all of these are hyperlinked. So if you wanted to dive into the how-tos of how to do these things, then you can get into that by grabbing them from the slide deck. So now we are going to go into our demos. So we're going to go over 2 main things today: how to create an assessment for learning using a survey and posting it to activity feeds so students are able to really easily access that. And then we're going to create an assessment as learning using our checklist tool and putting due dates in the calendar so students are able to really stay on track with their work. So now I'm just going to pull over my Brightspace environment. Now it might look a little bit different than yours, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So it might look a bit different than yours, and that's because Brightspace is really customizable. So the nav bar, the home page, those are things that you can kind of change to make suit your needs. So if yours looks a little bit different, that's okay. You have all the same tools. They might just be in a slightly different spot. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to create a survey to complete that assessment for learning. So if your survey tool is not sitting on the nav bar, it is within the course admin area. And that's kind of where you're going to find anything that's not sitting right out there for you. So if I scroll down under assessment, I can see a lot of different assessment options, and we're going to go into that surveys tool. So we are going to create a new survey. And today we're going to make an exit ticket. So after a lesson, I want students to do a quick check of their understanding of what was taught in that lesson and kind of go over kind of see where there are any gaps or any confusing points. So I'm just going to name this exit ticket, and maybe the lesson that I did was on arrays. So I'm going to name it arrays so I know which one it's referring to. Now I'm going to go down and add questions. Now there are a couple of options. There's create a new question, or you can import from the question library that you've created, but you don't need to do that. So if I go to new, the first question I'm going to do is going to be a multiple choice question just to do a quick assessment of their understanding. And I'm just going to call it, or give the question, rate your understanding. And as you can see on the right-hand side, you are getting a preview of what that question will look like to students. And there are some options here. You can make it, do some formatting things, add in some different features. And that's available to you in any of these question types. So instead of doing, maybe like a great, a little confused, I'm going to do a picture so that maybe my struggling readers or students that are English as their second language, they're able to really quickly do that assessment of for learning. So if I go into insert stuff, this is where a lot of great features are stored. So you are going to go into your computer, and you will have had to have saved an image on your desktop that you want to insert. And I'll tell you the reason for that in just a minute. So I'm going to choose a file, and I'm going to put in a happy face. Now I'm going to upload that. And if it's already in the system before, you can just overwrite it. Okay, so what you want is, so you're going to put in what this actually, what this picture is showing. And that's the reason we don't copy paste, is because for our students that have screen readers, you want them to be able to read what that is. So I'm going to insert that picture now. And I can change the size if it's a little bit too big, make it a little bit smaller. And then I can put in a second option, can put in, a sad face, and any ones that you don't want, you just put an X in. So I'm just going to save that in the interest of time and show you just another quick question type that I think is great to use in a survey. So the next type is the written response question. And you can type in the question text. So I want to know what was the muddiest point, so kind of the part that you're unsure of. And Again, it just takes a minute for the preview to go when I'm on Zoom, I find. So there are a couple options here, which I would recommend that you check off at least one of them. Just gives your learners a bit more of an option. So if you don't check them off, you can see students are able to just type into the box. However, if you enable the HTML editor, they then are able to insert some things to the top, or it does a spell check or an accessibility check. As well, if you enable inserted images and attachments, they're able to add a file, record audio, and record video. Now, all of these options, the enable inserted images and attachments, they're in the HTML editor, but I like that this is really easy for students to find. They're not they're not wondering where to look in the HTML editor. So I would suggest, checking off one or both of these, and then it differentiates for your students. They can give you a video note, they can record audio, they can type their answer. Just a quick one sentence, what did they not understand? So we're gonna save that, and there are my 2 questions. Now I am done editing those questions. So go back into the survey tool, and there are some other options that you can look through, but these are kind of the basic ones you need to have. You have to have the name and the questions in there. Then you can save and close. And I can see that my new survey is just written in the survey list. So I'm going to go to the drop-down menu, and the little I tells me that it's not visible. That is the default. I want to make it visible to my users so that they are able to take it. And quickly, before I show you how to post that to announcements, I just want to show you how you can actually look at the results of the survey to use that assessment for learning to plan your next or your future lessons. So if I go to the drop down of a survey that I've had a couple students complete, I'm going to go to the statistics area. Now, if I scroll down, I can see the attempt per student, and I can dig right into how the student answered these questions. So there's an option to do a Likert scale in a survey. So you can see this student doesn't really understand arrays quite yet. So lots of different information I can get here. Or if I want to just kind of see overall how my class is doing on a certain concept, I go to view overall results, and you can see a breakdown of kind of how your class as a whole is doing. So, if you have a lot of students that are in this kind of strongly disagree to disagree area of knowing what an array is, that could tell you that maybe I need to go do some more lessons or give some more assessment opportunities for students to learn about arrays. So now that my survey is completed, I want to make it really easy for my students to be able to access that survey. So if I go back to my homepage, which I get to just by clicking on the name of the course, I'm going to post an activity feed. Now, my activity feed sitting here, and I just am going to create a quick post. So my message is going to be, please complete exit ticket. And then I'm going to attach. So I'm going to attach an existing activity, and I can see all the activities in my course are sitting here. Scroll down to find surveys, and I'm going to attach that survey I just made. You can choose to post it later. So, you can kind of do all your work ahead of time, or you can just post it right away. So if I post it right now, you can see now at the top of my activity feed, the student can just really quickly on the homepage click into that survey that I want them to go to. So they don't need to kind of look around for it. It's right there available to them. So that's how I would complete that type of assessment for learning, creating a survey and making it really easy for my students to find. Now I want to show you how to create an assessment as learning. And we're going to dive into the checklist tool. So I'm going to go into it from the nav bar. Again, if it's not on the nav bar, it's in course admin. And I'm going to create a new checklist. So the checklist I want to create is going to be on the steps of the writing process. So I'm going to call this writing process. You can add a description if you'd like, but it's not necessary. And this checkbox, or sorry, at the bottom, new window. So if you check this off, it will open the checklist in a new window when viewed. I suggest doing that just because then when it opens, the checklist opens up in the new window, students then still have this main window open that they can kind of navigate through Brightspace and make sure that, you know, before they check off their checklist item, that's actually done. So I'm going to save that. And now is where you're going to actually put in the items for your students to check off. So every item has to have a category. A category really just you know, organizes the checklist a bit more, and the item is what students are going to check off as completed. So I'm going to create a new category. Different ways that teachers do this. Sometimes they do it by strand or by day of the week. Because this checklist is on the writing process, I'm going to name each category a different step. So I'm going to call this step 1. Again, you can put a description, but you don't have to. And I'm going to press save and new. And put in step 2, save and new, and step 3. Okay. So really, this is just like a title for each section. So I don't really feel the need to put in a big description here. I'm going to put in a description in my item, so students are really looking at each individual item they check off. So I'm going to save that. And now I can see each of my steps here. So now I'm going to add new items. And again, this is what students are going to check off as completed. So step 1 is going to be brainstorming. And this is where in the description, I'm going to tell students what the success criteria is for brainstorming. So maybe what I've talked about with my class is that we're going to complete a mind map. And in that mind map, you have to include kind of 5 ideas for what your short story is going to be about. So I'm going to write, please complete. And I'm not going to type mind map. I'm actually going to attach an assignment that I have created in Brightspace already. So please complete the assignment mind map. Put at least 5 ideas in your map. And if you go down, or you scroll down, you can check off to include a due date. So the reason for this is if you have a big project that you're doing, sometimes, I mean, I find it difficult myself sometimes. Students procrastinate. We all are guilty of doing that. So giving the checklist due date so students can really monitor their own progress and keep on track of their own learning, I think is a great feature of a checklist. So I'm going to add the due date. I want this you know, brainstorming mind map to be done by the end of the week, kind of end of the day, and it can display in the calendar so students can find it there and really keep themselves on track. So I'm going to save that. If you wanted to keep going, you put save and new, and if you wanted to keep going with step 1, you can leave that, or you can change it to the next step, just to the top. I'm going to press save. And now I can see that under step 1, I have brainstorming. And you can put, as I said, a new item under, so you can have a bunch of different items under step 1, a bunch under step 2, and so on. I'm going to save and close this. And I'm just going to quickly show you what this looks like from the student perspective. So if I go into the surveys tool, the checklist tool, I can see that the writing process checklist is sitting right here. The student would just check it or click into it, and it pops out a new window. And you can see that the student is able to just check off this item when it's done. So you can see the due date is there. It's also in the calendar, as I mentioned, and students are able to click right on that assignment, and it will bring them, oh, I didn't actually make that assignment available. So if they click on that assignment, the mind map, then they're able to be brought right to that assignment so that they can then put that in kind of following that workflow and not needing to look around Brightspace for different things. So I think this is a great way to keep kind of students on track of their learning, monitoring towards their own goals. And I know that I had mentioned at the beginning that you co-create this success criteria, and this is completely possible in Brightspace. So an option that I've heard of educators doing is they have created the checklist, just as I did with you, with their students synchronously. So they go through kind of making this checklist and they talk about the different, what does brainstorming mean? And they put that in with their students. So instead of having the checklist prepared in Brightspace ahead of time, they're going through it with their students and creating it with them. So there's a bit more ownership over those goals. So if students, last thing, if students do check off an item, it shows exactly when that was done. So there is that kind of piece of monitoring as well for students and teachers. So I'm just going to close this out and go back into the presentation. So today we've gone over how to create an assessment for learning using a survey and posting it to ActivityFeed for that really easy access for students. And we've gone over how to create an assessment as learning using a checklist with the due date that goes into the calendar. So that's the end of our webinar for today. Just wanted to point you to some upcoming webinars. Right after this, there will be one on assessment of learning in Brightspace hosted by one of my colleagues, April. And tomorrow there are 2 webinars, one on getting started with math and sciences in Brightspace, and then after using Google integrations with Brightspace. And you can register for those at the same spot that you registered for this one by following this link at the bottom here. And they're also on Thursday office hours for 1 hour. And that is where you come to, you can register, again, on this, at this link, the Educator Webinars website, and you can come with your questions. We will do some demos live, just like I went through today. Or we can respond to you in the chat. So really great if you have any kind of outstanding questions about the webinars that you've seen or any other Brightspace related questions. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me today. I know that it has been really, really a busy, crazy year. So I appreciate you coming and doing some professional learning after school. Hopefully you can join us for the next webinars this week, but if not, have an excellent rest of your week and stay well.